Both Eric Benhamou and Justin Rattner have taken some bold bets of their own over the years in both the tech and IT space, and they've seen those bets pay off. Eric Benhamou is the former CEO of 3Com, the digital electronics manufacturer, and of Palm, maker of PDAs and other electronics. And he's the founder and general partner of Benhamou Global Ventures. Justin Rattner is the former chief technology officer of Intel and director of Intel Labs. That's the high-profile research group. He joined that technology company more than 40 years ago after doing time at both Xerox and HP. The two are here to give us the long view and to share their insights on our technological future with Steve. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thank you. My hero. This is Justin. So great to see you, Aaron.
Good to see you.
So I love all the sessions we're doing this morning, but this is probably my favorite. I've been a fan of Justin Rattner's thinking. I'm a sort of YouTube fanatic fan of yours for the many years. And then Eric Benhamou was on my founding board of directors when I was a co-founder of the New America Foundation in Washington, D.C. So I called him up and said, thank you. So this is the idea, to talk about essentially the mechanics of a big idea, taking it to sort of scale. And I thought I'd start with you, Eric. I mean, you were chairman of 3Com and Palm, which I don't know to what degree they're still with us, but they were, the flavor of the year or month at some point, and you continue to sort of ride different waves. And I'm interested in, part of what we're discussing today is industrial entrepreneurship, the new waves of that, what it is to sort of sculpt and cultivate talent in that realm. And I'd love to get your insight just into that arena as you think about where you place your bets.
Sure. Well, 3Com, I think, is a good case study of how industrial research processes unfold. 3Com is a networking company which helped to create connections between personal computers, mainframes, and eventually the internet. And the seminal technology on which 3Com was built is the Ethernet local area network technology, which was subsequently standardized and that we take for granted today in all of our computers. That technology was originally developed at Xerox in the Palo Alto Research Center. Xerox PARC, as we know, was the seminal place where many inventions took place, but most of the commercialization of these inventions was leveraged by other companies. Apple, obviously, but 3Com really took the interesting innovations in the networking area and leverage them commercially across the
So you laid out that skeletal structure of connectivity early on.
That's correct.
And do you feel like you get credit for it, or people have forgotten that?
Well, Ethernet it sounds like a very old technology, but it is built into everything that we do. Now Ethernet no longer uses yellow cables like in the Xerox PARC labs. Right. It actually uses wireless, and we call it Wi-Fi. In different flavors of it, but the fundamental technology of packet transmission is something which is built into everything that we do today in all of our smart devices.
Justin, I mean, Intel Inside. I mean, we're going to sort of talk more broadly about your knowing a smart idea when you see it, and how do you jump at it? What do you not jump at?
Well, I think you begin to develop a sixth sense about these things, if you do it long enough. But there are criteria, attributes, and they differ, I think, depending on the nature of the industrial organization that's that's involved with them. We used to, I'm sure we still joke about it post my retirement, but at Intel we used to joke that $100 million businesses weren't very interesting because all the other businesses are billion-dollar businesses or multi-billion-dollar businesses. And I know many of the larger, older firms in the Valley, sort of have this issue that when they try to, when they want to incubate a business, getting it to 100 million, which would be fantastic for most investors, let's just put it, shareholders, it's kind of boring, say, gee, we need billion-dollar businesses. And so, as we established criteria, we wanted to see total available markets, at $1 billion within 5 years of the introduction of the product or the technology, whatever it was, and highly defensible, competitive positions. I mean, not very many Me Too companies build billion-dollar businesses, so we focused a lot understanding the underlying technologies and our ability to sustain innovation over a long period of time in a highly defensible way. Somebody would have to build $1 billion factory. I mean, that's just one example. There are many other defenses, but one of them is, you've got the ability to manufacture in high volume, and it would take somebody 5 years to duplicate that.
So, Justin, when I think about industrial technical innovation, and one of the things that I'm sort of interested in, again, I said we were sort of stacking the deck to talk more about that today than Facebook and Google and other stuff, the other kind of new stuff. And I wonder whether or not when you look out there today, do you see a robust environment of possible bets of new ideas, or have the new ideas sort of withered? And is it looking less? Because we often hear a lot. It's so great. There are a million ideas to invest in. But is that true?
No. And as a Ray Kurzweil fan, I would reject it out of hand.
Yeah.
This is the law of accelerating returns.
Right.
And the pace of innovation is accelerating. Right. It's not staying constant. It's accelerating. And people really struggle with that. One of my favorite bits of Gordon Moore history is he comes to the Valley. Oh gosh, this must have been in the 80s. I'm sorry. Government group comes to the Valley in the 80s, and they want to understand, why Silicon Valley is so, fruitful. And so Gordon Moore is called, to give testimony. And so, he's at the table and he lays out a bunch of chips on the table, and he's explaining how, each one is like, twice the performance or 10 times the performance, whatever it was. The number's not important. Every several years, he's explaining Moore's law, and the polls can't figure this out because their view of invention is, well, there was the telegraph, and then there was the telephone, and then there was television, and well, those were 20, 30, 40 years apart. Right. So it's not constant innovation; it's accelerating innovation. So and the tools you have to build on, whether it's wireless communication, which is huge and important beyond imagination, and cloud services, and analytics and all these things. It's just growing, and it's almost growing so fast that no one human can actually comprehend it.
Eric, do you agree with that formulation?
Yeah, I do. Oftentimes, there's confusion around the term innovation because it covers a very broad range of things, starting from fundamental research, as took place in Bell Labs and some of the big industrial labs, all the way to the latest applets that you disseminate on an app store. What changed in the last couple of generations is that a lot of the long-term risky research that took place in industrial labs really transitioned out to the academic sphere. And most large corporations who continue to carry research have had to move to shorter-term horizons in order to be able to coincide with the time horizon of their own shareholders. So if you engage in fundamental research whose byproducts will be visible commercially 50 years from now, this is not compatible with the latest hedge funds who took a position in your company.
So what's the healthy ecosystem for that? So if you have a large firm, like a Siemens or like an Intel, like pick one, that has these short-term pressures from the markets, but yet is tied to, say, a Stanford or a UC Berkeley, and you've got small entrepreneurs out there. What is the healthy way for that ecosystem to generate the most optimal outcomes?
Well, you cannot completely abdicate your role in fundamental risky research, but you have to shift the risk into the academic community and maintain very close ties with it. So in last generation, basically, big research universities like Berkeley or Stanford.
Did you work with Berkeley at 3Com?
I worked with Berkeley, but more Stanford.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry. But the principle is the same. There has to be a very close ecosystem of relationships and collaborations between the researchers who engage in long-term research in the academic community and the people who do more applied research inside an industrial complex.
Justin, when you think about now the mechanics of new big ideas, and we were talking a little bit earlier, in somewhat a cynically way, it's very interesting with Saul Griffin and others about the future of the factory and what's going to happen. What do you think are going to be the features? Imagine 10 years down that we're going to be looking at. Are we going to have big factories? Are we going to be manufacturing in our bedrooms? Are we going to what will be the disruptive element that we're blind to at this moment?
Yeah, I don't think most people have sort of gotten their head around what I call desktop manufacturing as opposed to 3D printing.
Right.
We did a study of this a few years ago at Intel, and the team that was doing it kept coming back to 3D printing and 3D printing, and I go, yes, okay, 3D printing.
So you're kind of done with that already.
Well, yeah. No, it was not that I was done with it. I said, but
you're jaded already.
I said, okay.
I want one.
But, well, I said, by the way, you're only excited about it because you've got companies now that are making desktop 3D printers, and so after a lot of back and forth, it helps to be CTO when you're in one of these debates. I said, look, I bet if you line up the progression of innovations around desktop printing with desktop manufacturing, including 3D printing, of course, right? You'll see that they look an awful lot alike. In fact, we built, that slide that showed, how desktop printing evolved, and no one imagined that it would completely disrupt your field. That journalism would suddenly, go from the Fifth Estate to, hey, any wag with a computer could suddenly be publishing on a global basis in a matter of microseconds.
Lance,
no. So that I think you can lay that picture out for manufacturing, and I think that doesn't say that we won't see big chip factories anymore. I mean, there are certain things that require economy of scale, but we will very likely see chip factories that shift from making a few designs in very high volume to make hundreds or thousands of designs in low volume, and they're engineered, and it's a different way than we build factories today. It's engineered so all of the design information moves electronically, and people broker access to fab and assembly and test and all of these things, and literally somebody sitting in their home wherever designs an integrated circuit, and a month or so later, back come the first samples.
So just the other day, you said to me, $1 spent in the lab can easily save $100 in the business unit. What do you mean by that?
Oh, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this an idea not get thoroughly vetted in the lab, and hundreds of millions of dollars get invested on the design
kind of like
side.
Apple Maps?
So, well, yes, that's actually relatively small. I'm thinking of a design many years ago before Intel got religion on energy efficiency. It was called Tejas, and Tejas was being designed down in Texas, and it was well north of 100 watts, and we're all tearing our hair out. How are we going to cool this thing? There really wasn't volume technology for cooling an IC of that power, maybe in a server, but certainly not in a desktop. And eventually we had to cancel it, but I mean, the design was done. It was just too power hungry. And
you could have seen that in the lab.
Yes, and we knew, looking at earlier generation designs, we knew that this, we were approaching this power wall.
Was that on the watch of the previous CTO?
No comment. I have to think about that now that you've said that. Probably, yes.
But I think CTO, when you're at a big firm, CTO's got to be the coolest job. And I mean, Eric Schmidt, many of you will know at Google, was a CTO at Sun Microsystems, a good friend of Eric Benhamou's. And there have been a number of people. I knew Sean Maloney at Intel years ago, who was very involved in the Wi-Fi side. I mean, are you sort of the Wizard of Oz types that dream? I mean, how much do you get to dream and kind of put together, go find entrepreneurs to make a vision work, and how much of it is costs and cynicism about what you've already got in place?
No, I guess there's sort of two questions there, but I think well, at least in my role. By the way, and I've never met two CTOs who had the same job. And in fact, the previous CTO, whose name should not remain a mystery, Pat Gelsinger, came to me after he was appointed CTO and said, "What do CTOs do?" And I said, "I don't know, but I'll call my buddies at Sun and and elsewhere, and ask them." And I never got the same answer twice. I mean, it was all very specific to to their company. But I always felt the best thing I could do was make connections. And if you can do that successfully, it's this force multiplier, right? Because suddenly you say, hey, there's somebody working on a new way to manage signal integrity in very dense systems operating in the multi-gigahertz regime, and then somebody's talking about, gee, we need to encrypt every access to memory, but we have to do that at wire speed, and suddenly you're down talking to circuit and logic people saying, hey, can we really do this, and not introduce, much delay. And sometimes, and very often, it's a piece of software. Somebody wants to do something in software, and gee, if we just had this little bit of hardware, so you got to bring those people together. So, I think that's, from my perspective, that was the most important part of my job, was making those connections.
Before we go to the audience, Eric, I want to ask you just about the global side of this. And when you think about, when we first sort of thought about this idea of industrial manufacturing entrepreneurship here, I had to scratch my head and said, how much do we still do that in America? And the Atlantic has published stories on the sort of comeback of manufacturing, that energy has fallen so dramatically. It's been a major systemic factor in the opportunities here, software changes, whatnot. So there seems to be flickers of a revival, but you have operations in Israel, you have operations all over the world, China. Who do you think, when you think about these component pieces of the smart factory of the future, what are the characteristics of the best places you've seen in the world? Who beats the United States? Who's beating everyone? Who's way ahead of us?
Well, the answer depends upon the kind of manufacturing you're talking about, as Justin was discussing. As recently as 2 weeks ago, an entrepreneur came into our office, and by the way, now I do mostly venture capital, so I listen to pitches of innovative entrepreneurs. And he talked to me about the 3D printing impact on manufacturing, which is now better understood. And the best way to think about this is that when you have a print job, a classical print job, paper, that you need to distribute to different locations, you would go to an outfit like Kinko's, and you would send your file over, and it would get printed in the location where you want the material to be distributed. So the exact analogy exists in the 3D world. If you want to deliver an object to a place near Boston, for example, you'd find the nearest 3D printer in the Boston area, convenient for you and for delivery. You would ship the bits across the wire, or the wireless rather, and you would get the atoms to be assembled right there. The trick is to do this in a way that's completely standardized, such that basically the manufacturing is completely disintermediated. This kind of manufacturing, I think we have a great chance to perform here extremely well, because it's mostly software. So there's another kind of manufacturing that Justin is very familiar with, which is the way semiconductor factories of today have evolved. most of the packaging, assembly, and testing is now completely automated. And you would walk into one of these plants, and you would be scared because there's nobody.
No people.
Nobody
Yeah.
there.
Exactly.
And completely different from these plants maybe.
What do you think of these warm and fuzzy types who keep wanting to keep people in manufacturing?
Well,
like Saul and Ken earlier.
I think that most people who want to create manufacturing jobs should visit some of these factories. So the mom-and-pop factories who do 3D printing today, as well as the modern industrialized factories that do extremely sophisticated manufacturing, assembly, and testing using very advanced robots. And then they would get a sense of what manufacturing technology is about today.
In the small scale, not even the big scale.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let me move to the audience. This fascinating discussion. Questions, comments from all of you. Yes, right here in the front. Don't be shy, blue shirt. I saw your hand go up. Yeah. You're like looking around.
Yeah.
Do I want to be first?
Okay, I'll be first. I guess it's not too academic a question at Berkeley, but...
Who are you, by the way?
Oh, I'm David Grossoff,
Nice to meet you, David.
and a Berkeley grad. The point about that Eric Benhamou made about the decline of of basic research within industrial labs, I thought the explanation was the loss of the natural monopolies of ATT and IBM, or the not-so-natural monopolies that they had. And as soon as they went away, Bell Labs went into decline and had a shorter time horizon. Similarly with Watson Research Center and the others. Isn't that the better explanation rather than scapegoating Wall Street, which is also a Berkeley hobby I enjoy?
I'm going to ask Justin to jump at this because this is one of your favorite topics I've read. You actually think the Bell Labs formula was the wrong formula?
Well, Eric and I were just talking about this in the green room. You think about the history of the transistor, and clearly one of Bell Labs' most important inventions. It really took took 2 generations of industrial organizations. Shockley had to leave to form Shockley Semiconductor, and then Noyce and Moore have to leave Shockley to form Fairchild Semiconductor, and where they have this this insight into how to build planar transistors, and suddenly you can build infinite numbers of those transistors. And I've debated this with Bell Lab groupies, I guess, and and they go, well, they were constrained because of the monopoly. They basically had to stop. They could do the invention, and and then they would back off. Of course, there are plenty of examples where things went from the labs, and Western Electric productized them and all of that. But I think the model that people had of industrial research, going back, well, even pre-war, but in the post-war years, Bell Labs was it, and people just said, I want one of those. I think the most famous quote is Bill Gates said, I want one of those, and they called it Bill Labs as opposed to Bell Labs, right? And in fact, he hired Rick Rashid, and Rick builds world-class research organization very much in that model.
Big Trekkie.
Yeah, and but what's happened, and I would say in the last 20, 25 years, is it's gotten just that much harder, and this is what Eric was saying, that much harder to justify to shareholders, if you're not in a monopoly position, spending that kind of money just to get fundamental research done. And so timelines have moved in. And I think the most important thing, and at least this is from my experience, is that people have to think less about pure invention and more about innovation. That is, not just having the idea, but getting the idea to a form where a product organization can engage and turn that thing into something you can sell. And that experience was sorely lacking in many of these organizations who were in the Bell Lab model.
Just real quick, how many great ideas out there are we not seeing because they weren't cultivated in the right way? They didn't find a mothership. They didn't, come along. I mean, how many great ideas that we just don't know about are dying on the vine in a percentage basis, Eric?
It's a very tough question to answer.
But there's got to be some model for thinking about it.
Well, just to give you a sense of some of the data, I know about is that in existing major industrial labs, some of the major technology companies who engage in research, I would say that they probably prototype 10% of the ideas which are created by the research community, and they probably commercialize 10% of those,
so it's 1%.
Down to 1%.
Wow.
So whether or not they did the right triage in all this, probably is not perfect. So I'm sure that you have a few percentage of good ideas, great ideas, big ideas that are wasted. Or that
so it's like Mark Andreessen has said and tweeted out that most great ideas of the future were already invented in the past.
Yeah, right.
Yeah?
Right.
Yes, right here.
Hi, Walker Kellogg with Inspire Lab. I apologize. This idea or question might not be fully baked, but it was inspired by your comments about the democratization of manufacturing, as well as well, let me just jump to the question. Do you see a space where it's possible for us to have kind of a crowdfunding of research and development, or would you argue that that's what Kickstarter is?
Thoughts on crowdfunding?
Well, Kickstarter is definitely a good place to engage in crowdfunding for creative projects, mostly on the artistic side. But there's nothing in the chart of Kickstarter to limit this to films. It could very well be research in a high-tech field or biological field. So yeah, I believe that that crowdfunding of these sort of ideas may exist. The difference, again, has to do with time horizon expectations. If you participate in funding a movie that you think will be realized over the next 12 months, you will get some, at least, psychic satisfaction of seeing a product of your contribution within your lifetime. Whereas if you engage in fundamental research, there are many people who today donate to cancer research or diabetics research, and they know very well that that whatever they contribute may not result into a cure in their lifetime. So the mindset already exists, and I'm sure that there'll be outfits who focus more on this aspect of crowdfunding.
Justin?
Yeah, it's a question of scale, and I always my counterexample is silicon photonics, which took us 12, 13, maybe even 14 years to go from concept to product. First of all, very long time horizon. The average Kickstarter investor is probably not going to, if it says expected outcome 10 years. But I think what desktop manufacturing does is expand dramatically what is possible in reasonable time frames that are more or less compatible with the kind of funding you could reasonably expect with Kickstarter. We just can't say, well, we'll rely on crowdfunding for everything, right? And with photonics, I mean, first of all, everybody said can't do light in silicon. It's just all wrong. You got to have 3.5 semiconductors and direct band gaps, blah 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 blah. Anyway, 10 years of research, you can do it, and you can build those chips in a standard CMOS chip factory. But you have to build a factory too, and a few other minor details like how do you test these circuits that you can't put a probe down on. You have to sort of look at optically and read out optical signals.
And of course, this was a winning technology.
Winning technology, dramatically changes the cost equation, and we could come back to Ethernet and talk about what does it take to get from 10 gigabits to 100 gigabits,
right.
and what's the premium you can get for that. But you need this spectrum of investment levels, some of which can be handled by crowdsourcing. And I guess maybe way on the other side is government, because your favorite security organization spent a lot of money funding the early research. And I'll just tell you anecdotally, since it's one of my favorite sort of government-funded research outcomes. I'm explaining this to a senior person at the agency that we're going to take silicon photonics to product. And she jumps out of her chair, and she starts pacing around the room. She goes, "This is fantastic. This is fantastic." And I go, okay, you know, what's fantastic about it? She said, well, you know, we invest in all kinds of technologies in the agency. Of course, most of them we either can't talk about or never get anywhere. But here is one we can talk about, and it's going to product. It was like, I can't wait to go back to Congress and tell them about this one. You know?
Pre-Solera.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we need to wrap up, but let me just also say that you know, if I were to respond, if I were on this panel, and I would say, you know, one of the things you have to think about when you think about the internet, you think about what these two gentlemen have done. These are two genuine giants who have built massive firms and laid down infrastructure on which everyone is building on top of now. And one of the things I've learned studying from Eric Benhamou and others is that small enterprises can take advantage of all the scale that's been previously built, and they can actually scale rather quickly. Large enterprises can fall very fast. And so in that environment, and we had Saul Griffith up here earlier, he is crowdfunding some of the technological work he's doing in Advances. So we didn't get into that earlier, but that's an example with other lab where they are, in fact, taking that model. I don't know how it will work or how it fits with this, but things are there. But it occurs to me with some of what you're talking about the small mom and pop shops that basically, you know, hit red down the road at some point, that's something that very well could have been crowdfunded in this new environment that's forming. So thank you, Eric Benhamou, Justin Rattner. Thank you both very much for joining us. This was a real treat. Thank you both. Thank you.